When does a government solution, maybe one intended to help hardworking people, actually become the main problem? And who ends up paying the price when regulators create these costly rules that seem to just destroy jobs?
That's really the tightrope, isn't it?
Mm,
Especially for an industry like coal, which has been so vital to America. What we're seeing in the sources today is this direct clash, a collision between rules meant for worker safety and this constant political push to deregulate, for economic reasons.
absolutely. So, our mission today is a deep dive into how the coal industry is regulated. It's complex. We've looked at sources that really put the economic hit from regulations right up against these crucial safety standards for workers. We're trying to pinpoint where Washington's goals, maybe for clean energy or deregulation, meet the real world in coal country.
And you can feel the tension right now. I mean, you've got politicians out there very loudly promising to unleash America's energy potential. Standing up, they say, for hardworking coal miners.
Right, that's the message.
But then you look closer at the agencies themselves, like MSHA, that's the Mine Safety and Health Administration. And, well, you see a contradiction. They're actually delaying some key health rules.
Delaying them.
Yeah, while at the same time pushing other expensive environmental rules that the industry is saying, look, this is just killing jobs faster.
It sounds like a classic case of mixed signals, conflicting priorities, maybe. You have health advocates pushing hard for rules like the Black Lung Rule. That's the one meant to cut silica dust exposure for miners in half. Seems like a good thing, right?
On the surface, absolutely.
Yeah.
Necessary, even.
But then the critics, economists, industry leaders, often from a more conservative angle, they argue, these regulations, however well-intentioned, are just too burdensome. They make the industry, well, financially impossible to sustain.
And they bring numbers to back that up. The financial case for deregulation, it's pretty striking. Some experts estimate that if you really push deregulation for coal plants across the country, focusing on efficiency, cutting costs, the benefit could be huge. We're talking maybe $40 billion a decade.
40 billion, that's significant.
It's not pocket change, right? That's potentially lower energy bills for everyone. It's maybe giving the industry a chance to compete again.
So, okay, the core tension seems clear. Do we prioritize these strict, potentially very expensive safety rules, or do we prioritize the economic side, keeping those jobs going, keeping what they call the nation's most affordable energy source available? Let's dig into that. Why are industry groups fighting these new rules so hard?
Well, let's follow the money, because really it boils down to compliance costs. The main argument against new regulations is simple. They create extreme costs for coal mining operators. It's not just one rule, it's the pileup. They argue it makes mining more expensive, building new plants more expensive, even running the old ones more expensive.
Hold on, I remember reading something about the history here. Didn't the old way of regulating utilities actually discourage efficiency? Kind of created weird incentives.
It absolutely did. Think about it like this. Historically, utilities operated under this cost-plus model. Basically, they could charge customers based on their investment plus the cost of the fuel they burned.
Okay.
So imagine hiring a contractor who gets paid more if he buys more expensive materials. Is he going to shop around for the best price? Probably not. The system literally paid utilities back for whatever fuel they bought, no matter the cost.
I see. So the regulations were almost encouraging them to buy, what was the phrase, bloated production configurations and overly expensive fuel.
Exactly. Spending was rewarded, not saving. So the critics argue that deregulation forces companies to be efficient, to find cheaper, maybe cleaner coal, cut down on those big capital costs. And that ultimately helps the consumer. In that view, new regulations are just adding more layers of cost, unnecessary cost, onto a system that should be allowed to streamline itself.
Which brings us right back to that Black Lung Rule, the silica dust issue. The fight isn't just about whether the air in mines should be cleaner, it's about how companies have to achieve it, right? The methods.
Precisely. MSHA, the safety agency, they really insist on using what they call engineering controls, first and foremost.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
It means expensive, built-in fixes, things like entirely new ventilation systems throughout the mine, or specialized water sprays to knock down dust, maybe dust collectors built into the equipment, big capital-intensive stuff.
And the industry groups, like the National Mining Association, what's their alternative? What do they want MSHA to do?
They argue MSHA should follow the lead of OSHA, that's the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which covers most other industries. OSHA's standards often allow for less costly approaches, sometimes called administrative controls, to be part of the solution.
Can you maybe explain the difference, engineering versus administrative?
Sure. Think of engineering controls like that new ventilation as permanent, high-cost changes to the mine itself. Administrative controls are more about procedures and equipment for the workers. Things like rotating shifts, so one miner isn't in the dustiest area all day long, or relying more on PPE, personal protective equipment, better respirators, things like that.
So cheaper, more flexible options.
Exactly. The industry argues these cheaper, more flexible approaches can get you the same or even better safety outcomes, but without the huge price tag that they say pushes companies towards bankruptcy.
Yeah, when you frame it against that potential $40 billion in efficiency gains from deregulation, you can see why they'd view every expensive mandate as this anchor, just dragging them down. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the real-world impact, the burden on jobs, on energy security, as these conservative sources see it.
And they argue the job losses aren't just, hypothetical. They point to specific regulations. Take the stream protection rule. That single rule, critics estimated, could have cost 40,000 direct mining jobs.
40,000 from one rule.
That's the estimate. And if you count the ripple effect, the truck drivers, the suppliers, the local businesses that depend on mining, the numbers some sources used went as high as 280,000 total jobs potentially lost. Wow, those are massive numbers. Now, I know opponents of that view often say, well, wait a minute. Those job losses are really about automation or maybe cheaper natural gas taking over coal's market share, not just regulations. How do these sources respond to that? Well, they acknowledge market forces are always there, definitely. But the conservative sources we looked at really zero in on the regulatory burden as the policy choice that tips the scale. They argue when regulations make it so expensive to mine the coal that's right there under the ground, that's a job lost because of a specific government action, not just the market.
Okay.
And they make this pretty startling claim that regulations could render up to 2/3 of all the proven coal reserves in the U.S. economically untenable.
So the coal exists, we know where it is, but the cost of following the rules means you might as well leave it in the ground.
That's the argument. It's effectively off limits because of regulatory cost.
Yeah.
And this isn't just about mining jobs, right? It hits energy security. It hits your power bill.
How so?
Because coal, despite everything, is still our most abundant energy source. And, critically, often the most affordable. But critics see policies like the Obama-era Clean Power Plan as part of this larger anti-fossil fuel campaign. They say it doesn't just kill coal jobs, it drives up electricity costs for everybody and even makes the power grid less reliable. The argument is, when Washington makes our cheapest fuel artificially expensive, every family feels it.
Okay, so the government makes it too expensive to get the coal out. Then Washington tries to step back in and help these same communities, right? Let's look at that legislative fix attempt, the Reclaim Act. Why did critics, especially places like the Heritage Foundation, say this was actually a bad idea, even counterproductive?
Right, the Reclaim Act. It sounded good on paper, maybe? Congress trying to show they care about coal country.
Yeah.
But critics saw it basically as a shell game with money. The idea was to take funds from the Abandoned Mine Land Program, the AML fund.
Okay, what's that fund normally for?
It's collected from a tax on current mining companies. And its sole purpose, its original purpose, was to clean up old, abandoned mine sites from before 1977. We're talking about the really dangerous ones.
Dangerous how?
Priority 1 and 2 sites. The collapsing tunnels, toxic water running off, dangerous high cliffs near towns, real immediate public health and safety hazards. That's what the money is supposed to fix.
And Reclaim wanted to take that money and use it for
Economic revitalization projects. Critics called them politically enticing projects that often had very little to do with fixing those urgent safety problems. The sources gave examples like using AML money to fund a water line for a local campground.
a campground water line instead of fixing a collapsing mine shaft. That sounds misplaced.
That's the critique. And they looked at the results. The cost effectiveness was, well, abysmal, according to these analyses. They calculated that using AML funds this way costs somewhere between $127,000 and $190,000 for every single job created.
Whoa, that's an incredibly expensive way to create one job.
Exactly. Think about how much actual safety cleanup could have been done with that same money. It looked like subsidizing political pet projects instead of dealing with real hazards.
So the argument is these government-led efforts to revitalize just don't work well.
Historically, the track record isn't great. The sources talk about dismal rates of success for these kinds of federal economic development programs in coal country.
Do they have examples of that failure?
Yeah, they have mentioned programs like Power, aimed at retraining miners for new jobs. Sign-ups were sometimes incredibly low. One figure cited was only 15% of capacity. 15%.
So that workers weren't even signing up for the retraining.
It suggests maybe the jobs weren't there or the training wasn't relevant. Whatever the reason, it points to a broader failure of these top-down government solutions. So the conclusion from these sources is pretty direct. If you really want to help coal communities, stop trying to divert safety funds into these inefficient schemes. Instead, roll back the regulations that they say kill jobs without providing significant environmental benefits. Let the market figure it out.
Which leads us perfectly into our last point, this apparent paradox in politics. You hear the rhetoric about supporting miners, supporting blue-collar workers, but then you look at what actually happens with policy.
Yeah, this is where it gets really contradictory for the listener trying to follow along. You had administrations, very loudly promoting economic growth, cheering for more coal mining, even pushing to open up more federal land for mining. The message was very pro-industry, pro-production.
Okay, that's one side. What was happening on the worker safety side at the same time?
Well, that's the rub. While all that pro-coal talk was happening, the agency in charge of safety, MSHA, again was actually delaying the implementation of that critical silica rule we talked about,
Yeah.
the one to protect miners from black lung.
They delayed it. Why?
They gave reasons like, oh, agency restructuring, technical issues. Vague stuff. But here's the really telling part, according to these sources. MSHA chose not to defend the rule in court when the industry sued to block it.
So wait, the administration is saying we support miners, but the safety agency steps aside and basically lets industry lawsuits weaken or kill a major health protection rule without putting up a fight.
That's how the critics frame the political alignment, yes. And it wasn't just the administration. Congressional Republicans were also actively challenging these new safety rules, trying to cut off funding to implement them. It paints a picture where the political priority was clearly deregulation, reducing the burden on industry, even if it meant slowing down or stopping health mandates. A choice was made, prioritizing production and profits, driven by that goal to unleash America's energy potential.
It really crystallizes that trade-off we started with. This whole deep dive shows how regulating coal is like walking a tightrope. You're balancing the need for safety rules, which sound good and are often necessary, against the very real, immediate economic consequences, job losses, higher energy costs that those rules can bring, according to these sources.
And the strong suggestion from the sources we analyzed is that, from a conservative viewpoint, jobs and affordable energy are fundamentally tied to less regulation, not more. So it leaves you with a pretty provocative question. If government interventions, like reclaim or some retraining programs, consistently turn out to be expensive, inefficient, fail to help workers effectively, and actually make the core problem of job loss worse by making energy production uneconomical, does that conservative argument win out? Is the best help Washington can offer coal communities simply to get out of the way?